Okay, everybody, so I promised you that I would do a YouTube video for you on Factorial ANOVAs. So I've done that, and I was going to write everything on this little board as I was doing it, but what's happening here is I'm obviously videoing myself, and this is a mirror image, so I had to write in the complete like mirror image of it so it would make sense to you when you see it here, and that took me a while, and I wouldn't be able to just do that on the spot while I'm being videotaped. So I'm going to show you sort of what I have as I walk through the Factorial ANOVA. So my goal here is that by the time you're finished listening to this and kind of thinking about these ideas, that you'll understand what a factorial ANOVA is, that you'll understand what main effects are, marginal means, what an interaction is, and when you don't have an interaction, what that looks like, and what your cell means tell you. And if we can do a bar graph, although I'm not quite sure how I'm going to make that work. I think I might have to pause it and then draw out this bar graph and mirror image as well. So we'll see. Okay, so what I did here was I did a factorial ANOVA with a 2x3 design. So it's a 2x3 factorial ANOVA. So I want you to think about this for a minute. How many independent variables are there in a 2x3 factorial ANOVA? 2, okay, because it's the number of numbers essentially. So the 2 is an independent variable and the 3 is an independent variable. Now, why are they 2s and 3s? Like, what do those things mean? Well, the first independent variable is a 2, and it's a 2 because it has 2 separate groups or 2 separate levels, however you want to think about it. So whatever that independent variable is, there's 2 conditions of it, okay? Then the next independent variable is a 3, and it has 3 conditions or 3 levels that are a part of it. Okay, so we have 2 independent variables. One has 2 levels, the other has 3 levels. In total, how many total conditions do you have in a 2x3 design? 6, okay, because you're multiplying the 2 times the 3, so you should get 6 total conditions. In a 2x3 design, how many main effects do you have? 2. The reason for that is that you're going to have one main effect for each independent variable. So we just talked about the fact that we have 2 independent variables, therefore we have 2 main effects, okay? In terms of the number of interactions, well, an interaction requires 2 independent variables to interact. In this particular case, we only have 2 independent variables. We have the 2 and the 3, so they can interact. That's one interaction, okay? So only one interaction is possible. Now, when we get in and we talk about what this interaction looks like, it's going to involve a lot of different numbers, but it's still just considered one interaction, okay? All right, so let me introduce you to this example that I have going on over here, okay? So in this example, I've decided that we're going to have a 2x3 design, so 2 independent variables. And what we're going to be looking at is the impact of encouragement and the impact of tutoring on test performance. So there's obviously research out there talking about tutoring and how it improves test performance. But there's also some stuff out there that says just encouraging students will also motivate them and improve their test scores. So we're going to have both of those as possible predictors of test performance here. Okay, so we have 2 independent variables, encouragement and tutoring. Well, I knew I wanted to do a 2x3 design for you, so what that means is that one of these independent variables needs to have 2 levels and the other one needs to have 3 levels. So I just decided to make the encouragement the one with 2 levels and tutoring is going to be the one with 3 levels, okay? So with encouragement, this is just going to be yes or no. So either people are getting encouragement or they're not getting encouragement. So if I was bringing people into a lab study, I would bring them in I would randomly assign them to either get encouragement or not get encouragement, okay? And then take a test after they've studied or something. The tutoring, I needed to come up with 3 levels for that. So what I decided to do was say, imagine like we have one condition where the professor is doing the tutoring, one condition where the tutor is doing the tutoring, and then one condition where there's no tutoring happening whatsoever. So that's our 3 different levels of tutoring. And then the outcome here is test performance. So all of the numbers that you see, those are all test scores. Okay, those represent test scores in terms of how the groups are doing. Okay, so bring it up here. Oh, I don't think I fixed my numbers mirror image. Rats, I did so well. Okay, hold on. Let me fix them, because otherwise you're going to be crazy confused. But you see how crazy that is, right? Like that I have to sit there and do them in the mirror image of each other. So hold on one second. Do. So this is also if my handwriting looks really sloppy. It's because this is really challenging. Okay. So is this better? Yes. Good. Okay. So what we have here is our beautiful 2x3 design. So you see you have tutoring at the top with the 3 conditions. So the professor's doing the tutoring, the tutor's doing the tutoring, or there's no tutoring. And then we also have encouragement, and that's yes or no. Okay, so essentially what's happening is people are coming into the study and they're being randomly assigned to one of these conditions. So I'm Joe off the street and I come in and I'm randomly assigned here. So this would mean that I'd be in the group that's getting encouragement and the professor is going to be doing the tutoring. Okay. All right, so I made up these numbers. It's very possible on your exam that I'll also ask you to be making up numbers, okay? So in a discussion with a student earlier, we were talking about where do these numbers come from. And I sometimes have said, oh, they're random or they don't, you just make them up. And that is true that you make them up, but I guess they're not essentially random. I mean, here I'm talking about test performance. So obviously you know that it needs to be on some kind of 0 to 100 scale, right? It's test performance. And then obviously you're also going to sit here and think, well, like obviously the people who are going to get tutoring should sort of be doing better. So I need to be thinking about those things as I'm making up these numbers so that in the end, when I'm trying to interpret what happened here, it makes a little bit more sense to me because I had ideas about it in the first place. So let me explain what I mean. All right, so I started off by looking at my professor group and the encouragement yes group. So these people right here. And I thought that they should be doing relatively well compared to everybody else. I mean, they're getting encouragement, the professor's tutoring them, so they should be doing some of the best. So I just anchored that at an 80 and built everything sort of around them. Let's keep on here, hold on, let me move this down. Sorry. Okay. All right, so let's stay with the encouragement group, so yes, and let's move over to the one that the actual tutor is tutoring. So they're still doing pretty well at a 75. I guess that depends on who you are if you think that's well, but I think it's decent. So they're getting a 75 with tutoring and with encouragement. And then these people over here are getting encouragement, but they're not getting any kind of tutoring. Okay, so they're getting on average about a 60. So down here, we have the people who are not receiving any encouragement. And I decided to make this an 80, a 75, and then down here 50. Okay, so we need to do a couple of things when we're trying to interpret this. Like, what does this mean? Okay, if you were to actually get these numbers, what would that tell you? Okay, so just I'm going to pick out one of these numbers just to illustrate what the number itself means. Let's do this 75 right here. Okay, this 75 represents the average, okay, the average of everybody in this group. okay? So let's say there's 20 people who are in the tutoring by a tutor and encouragement group. That's these people. This is their average of about a 75. That's how well they're doing. Okay, so these numbers in the boxes represent averages or means for the people in that group. Okay, so that's something important to remember. All right, so one thing I have not included, maybe I'll use a different color for this. One thing that I have not included are the marginal means. Okay, so if I just want to know, does encouragement matter? Okay, that's all I want to know. I'm saying, okay, well, you know what? I don't really care about the tutoring. That's not important to me. And I just want to know if being encouraged leads to better test scores than not being encouraged. Okay, so that's my primary question right at this moment. So how am I going to figure that out, right? I have right now 3 numbers on that row for yes and 3 numbers on that row for no. So it's hard for me just looking at those 3 to tell like who is doing better. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to average across those rows. So for the first one, I've got 80 plus 75 plus 60. And I'm going to add those together, and then I'm going to divide by 3 because there are 3 total means there. And I get a 71.67. So I'm going to write that on that top row. Ugh. Okay, did I do that right? Yes, okay, so 71.67. On the bottom row, it's going to look a little bit different because that last number is different. So instead of having a 60, I have a 50. So I'm going to do that. So I'm going to take my 80 plus 75 plus 50 and divide that by 3, and I get a 68.33. So let's do that really quick. Where did my pen go? Sorry. Okay, does that look right? Yeah, okay, so 68.33. So if I were just interested in what's called the main effect of encouragement, I would be looking at these green marginal means over here and comparing them to each other. Okay, so this is the average of everybody who was encouraged, and this is the average of everybody who was not encouraged. And I'm looking at that and I'm saying, okay, are those different? Now, we're not learning how to do all of the math behind this, so we are not going to get to the point where we can know for sure if these 2 means are significantly different. A lot of the time I'll ask you, is it possible for you to have a significant main effect? And it is certainly possible because the numbers are different, okay? So if I were describing this main effect, I would say the main effect of encouragement shows that people who are encouraged perform better on their test than people who are not encouraged. Okay? Okay, so that's our main effect of encouragement, but we also have a main effect of tutoring that we need to be able to deal with. So we're going to do the same thing where we go and calculate some averages here. And we're going to do that for each of our tutoring groups. So, for example, in our first tutoring group, which is the professor doing the tutoring, I have an 80 and an 80. So I need to average those, and you will get an 80. So I'm going to write that down here. Same sort of situation here. The average of a 75 and a 75 is a 75. And then over here, a little bit different, we have an average of a 60 and a 50, which is going to be a 55. Okay, so I'm going to write that in. Okay. All right, so you should see my new marginal means there on the bottom, and those are illustrating the main effect of tutoring. So these numbers are also different, and they communicate that it's possible that I could have a significant main effect. My significant main effect would tell me that participants who are receiving tutoring from the professor are doing the best. People who are receiving tutoring from the tutor are doing second best, and the people who are not receiving any tutoring are doing the worst. Okay? Hopefully that makes sense so far. Those are your two main effects. So far I've gone over the main effects here when looking at encouragement, and then, the main effects down here when looking at tutoring. Now, the last thing that we need to talk about, the last kind of effect that we might have here, would be an interaction. And remember, in a study where you only have two independent variables, there's only one possible interaction. So we're just looking for one possible interaction and looking to see if we can explain that in some way. Now, I tried to explain this in class, like this whole idea that we just want to know if an interaction is possible here, like it could possibly be significant. And unless you find that the pattern across each row is exactly the same, so the pattern up here is the same as the pattern down here, if you find that those match, no interaction. Okay, it's not even possible for that interaction to be significant. But if there's a slight change in the pattern, then it is possible for you to have a significant interaction. So here, I think I explained it to you in class, is sort of like going down by a certain number of points or going up by a certain number of points. So if we're just taking our yes encouragement row, going from professor to the regular tutor, we go down by 5 points. Okay, down by 5 points. And then going from tutor to no tutoring, we go down by 15 points. Okay, those two differences don't have to match. Those are fine. Okay, we're just saying, okay, down by 5, down by 15. Now, what I'm looking for is whether or not on the second row we see that same thing occurring. Do we see down by 5, down by 15? If we see down by 5, down by 15, then what that's telling us is there's no possible significant interaction. Okay, so let's look on this second row. We see down by 5, but then we see down by 25. So because that pattern across the bottom row is not the same as the pattern on the top row, then an interaction is possible. Now, the more challenging part here is just figuring out, what does that mean? How do you explain it? So I'm going to take a stab at communicating that with this particular example. One way to describe this is that basically encouragement is not really making a difference when you're looking at participants who are being tutored, regardless of whether it's the professor or a tutor doing it, right? Because these numbers stay the same, regardless, encouragement, yes or no, and these numbers stay the same, encouragement, yes or no. Okay? So it's sort of saying that if you're being tutored, the positive impact that encouragement might have on you sort of becomes obsolete because you're learning all the material well and you're being tutored on it and you understand. Now here we do see an effect of encouragement. So when you're not receiving any kind of tutoring, being encouraged does lead to higher grades than not being encouraged. Okay? And so you would want to be able to to explain that, to say something just like that when you were describing what was going on here in this possibly significant interaction. Okay, so hopefully that has made some sense. I will probably take a pause and do another video with the graph for this so you can see what that looks like. But email me if you watch this video and you're really not sure what is going on, or you still have some lingering questions about Factorial ANOVA. I'll be happy to answer those. And then definitely tune in for the next video where we do the graph. That'll be the graph of these numbers. So you definitely want to make sure that you have that. Okay,